Anyway, in response to his winning of the Nobel Prize, which he got, by the way, for studying climate change, global warming, and how to solve this climate problem, which he took seriously.
Oh dear Lord, it's going to be another one of those videos.
His solution, indeed he said it was the only solution, was a market solution. Raise the price of institutions, companies that pollute the air, basically.
Well, I'd hardly call what he had in mind a market solution. You see, what Professor Wolff here is describing is known as a carbon tax. Basically, it's when the government comes in and they force you to pay an extra amount of money for things that contribute to carbon emissions. Now, this is not a market solution because the market is based on voluntary interactions. Both people agree and benefit from each exchange. Because the carbon tax has to be artificially introduced by a third party against the will of either of the participants, it's not a market solution.
Well, I've always found this extraordinary. You raise the price. That means people who have to buy these things are going to be hurt.
Well, hey, look at that. It turns out Richard Wolff does understand economics after all. Well, how about that?
What an interesting way of solving a problem, hurting large numbers of people.
Great, wonderful, we're off to a good start. Now, if Richard Wolff would just take this same logic and apply it to all the other bullshit he advocates for, we'd be golden.
Wouldn't it be easier just to outlaw the practice?
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
God damn it, dude, we were off to a good start. Just when it seemed like Richard Wolff finally starts to understand the issues with his ideology, he drops this line. Let's take a minute to walk through his logic here. Restricting access to a commodity that people need hurts them, therefore let's cut it off completely. Like, this isn't even a matter of politics or economics, this is basic fucking logic here.
Why this playing around with markets?
Because outlawing something doesn't magically make it disappear, and if there's demand for something, then there's always going to be an incentive for someone to come along and provide it, legal or not. You see, what I don't get is that the left understands this concept perfectly well when it comes to drugs, and you hear them argue against the war on drugs with conservatives. But in the same breath, they'll say ban guns, ban incandescent light bulbs, ban drinks over a certain number of ounces, etc., etc. Whether or not you agree with libertarianism, one thing you definitely have to give us credit for is being consistent. That's probably the one thing we do excel on more than any other political ideology.
And to tell us that the market solution is the only solution? That's straight out wrong.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was necessarily saying that the only solution is the market solution. I think they're saying market solutions have a tendency to be more effective than other types of solutions. I mean, yeah, of course there are other types of solutions, that should be more or less obvious. Saying that this particular type of solution tends to be more effective than other solutions isn't necessarily saying that that's the only possible solution in every scenario.
Let me give you a couple of examples. 100 years ago, one of the great horrors of capitalism was child labor.
Oh yes, of course, because child labor is solely a product of capitalism. Socialist and communist countries never used child labor at all. It's not like the Soviet Union had gulags and labor camps where children were often sent, or anything like that. No, it's only a capitalism thing.
The practice of capitalists to lower the wages they had to pay, to hire children as young as 5 and 6 years of age.
Yeah, way to fearmonger and tug at people's sympathy by mentioning the ages of the children involved. Oh no, they hired children as young as 5 and 6. Well, so? Parents make their children do chores at ages as young as 5 and 6. Is that some obscene example of exploitation? You know what I never understood? When parents make their kids do work, it's a good thing. It teaches them responsibility and work ethic. But when a business owner does it, that's evil. That's child labor. Like, how is a child taking out the trash at a restaurant more oppressive than taking out the trash at their home?
Pay them very little.
Okay, well the alternative is them not getting paid at all, which means instead of making whatever meager amount they're making before, they're now making nothing. So anything the child would have done with that money, for example, support their family, save up to get an education, or maybe, spend some time with their friends, go out and do something fun, is now gone, all because you wanted a moral white horse into a voluntary interaction.
And stick them in place of adults who would have had to be paid more.
Alright, well let's take a minute to think about what's going on here. The business is saving money, children now have opportunities to earn money and gain new skills that they didn't have before, and because the business is saving money, there's a good chance that they'll be able to reinvest in their business and provide more jobs to adults. So everybody kind of wins. Where's the problem?
And of course these children will lost in terms of their schooling, which they lost?
Not really. Actually, as a matter of fact, more often than not, what these children did with the money they earned was they used it to save up to get an education. Child labor actually enables kids to get an education because it means that even if you come from a poor family, you can still scrounge together the cash to pay your tuition. And that's not to mention any on-the-job skills the child might learn directly from the job.
In terms of their childhood, which they lost.
Hey, Mr. Wolff, you know we still do have child labor in America. You see, anyone under 18 years of age is technically considered a child in the eyes of the law. And plenty of teenagers have jobs. In some states, you can start working as young as 12. So we have plenty of teenagers and young people out there in the evenings after school, maybe on the weekends, maybe during summer break, working and earning money. And yet somehow these people still manage to get an education, still have their childhood, still go out and have fun with their friends.
It was thought to be a horror.
Yes, it was thought to be a horror, primarily by people who thought with emotions instead of logic and didn't get all the facts. See, not only did child labor enable kids to earn money to get an education and learn additional skills through on-the-job training, but children actually spent less hours per week in the factory than they did on the farm previously, and these factory jobs were safer too. So what they were moral white knighting against was a safe way for kids to earn money and get an education that resulted in them working less than they did before on the farm.
Now, of course, a market solution might have been to raise the wages that had to be paid to children, and there were some efforts to do that.
This guy doesn't seem to understand what a market solution means. In a market solution, all parties involved are engaging in a transaction of their own volition. There's no outside force or coercion involved. If a third party is butting into the interaction against the will of any of the people involved and imposing something without consent, that is not a market solution.
But thankfully, American families rose to the occasion and said, no market solution. Cut.
Ah, the cult of democracy once again rears its ugly head. Hey, don't get mad at us. We're just giving you what you asked for. American families wanted this. Yeah, I'm sure every family in America was sitting there thinking, gee, if we had one less source of income, that would be super helpful for us. Thanks, government.
None of it. Make it a crime to hire children.
So I believe in a non-aggression principle, which basically means that in order for there to be a crime, there has to be an identifiable victim who was harmed. Now in the case of child labor, who's the victim? Is it the business owner who voluntarily agreed to pay money in exchange for the labor from the child? Is it the child who voluntarily agreed to perform the specified labor in return for the agreed sum of money? Now of course there's always going to be a bit of a gray area when you're dealing with children. Children don't always have the mental capacity to understand and consent to things. So depending on the age and the type of work involved, you may want to have, parental approval or have parents assist the child in the hiring process. But the idea that you're going to bar any business from hiring a child, period, is just kind of ridiculous.
Guess what? Solved the problem.
Actually, it didn't. You see, child labor was on the decline long before it was officially outlawed. You want to know the real reason child labor was made illegal? Some politician somewhere noticed that child labor was on a rapid decline and thought to himself, if I could take credit for that, that would look really good for my re-election campaign. And this isn't by any means limited to child labor. This is actually a very common political strategy. Take a problem that's already being solved by the market, pass some sort of law intending to solve that problem, and take credit for it to make your campaign look good.
And it didn't have to do it by a market.
The biggest factor in reducing child labor in this country, and of course I say reduce because we still have child labor in this country, but to a large extent the reason you don't see a whole lot of young children working anymore is the growth of the middle class. As your average American family became wealthier, there was less of a need for children to work, and more money for kids to be able to pay their tuition to go to school. And this is actually corroborated with data from other countries around the world. The places where you tend to see most child labor are developing poor countries. So the economic data is clear on this. If you want kids in school instead of the factory, the best way to accomplish that is economic growth.
Which would have been difficult and slow. Market solution? Not advisable here.
Just because a solution appears to be quicker and easier doesn't necessarily make it a better solution. Why rely on market forces to reduce or eliminate a problem when you can just have the government ride in on a white horse and get rid of it altogether? But as I've explained earlier, the problem with that is that banning something, making it illegal, doesn't automatically get rid of it. And this whole myth that it does actually causes a lot of harm. To explain why that is, let's take a look at some other countries' approach to dealing with child labor. Unlike here in the United States, where we've had a largely market approach to reducing child labor, a lot of other countries in the world were seeking to take Mr. Dr. Wolff's advice and ignore the market solutions and just ban it outright. This didn't actually fix the problem of child labor. As a matter of fact, it made it much worse. Because you see, what the legislators in these countries failed to realize is that making child labor go away doesn't get rid of the need for those families to earn the income from that child labor. Their need for that income is still there. And well, if you take away their ability to earn that income legally, they have no choice other than to do it illegally. So in countries that deal with child labor the Wolff way, we see children being forced into the drug trade and prostitution and really shady shit like that. So we've basically gone from children working in a factory or a farm to children slinging cocaine or giving some pedophile a blowjob. Not that either of these scenarios are necessarily ideal for the child, but I think most of us would rather have them in the factory. And this is a big reason I do what I do. Now, I do enjoy it. I think it is fun to debate and discuss intellectually stimulating subjects like this, but there is a very practical side to it. These myths that people believe about government solutions versus the market, they cause a lot of real-world harm. So by making these videos to educate and inform people and start a discussion, I feel like I'm having fun, I'm enjoying it, but I'm also contributing to a very practical reduction of human suffering by doing this. And you, dear viewer, can contribute as well. Links to my Patreon and PayPal will be in the description. Until next time, this has been Philosophosa, making stupidity play dead. Have a good one.